When Alolan variants first dropped, they promised a massive refresh. The idea was that giving fresh typings and abilities to outclass Generation 1 classics would finally fix them for modern competitive play. But competitive players know the real bottleneck in team building isn't finding good Pokémon, it's managing resources. Breeding hours, Stardust, and candy are strictly limited commodities. To figure out if these new forms are worth that cost, we have to evaluate them across 3 arenas: mainline VGC opportunity cost, resource efficiency in Pokémon Go, and actual financial return on investment in the TCG market. So, does an Alolan Passport make a Cantonian Classic mathematically better? Or are you pouring your hard-earned resources into a trap? The baseline truth is that these aren't patch notes. You don't just take an original form, swap its elemental typing, and get a linear mathematical upgrade. This chart maps competitive viability against resource investment. Most of your classic Cantonian forms sit right here on the lower left. They don't cost much to build anymore, but they also don't win you games. Bumping up a base attack stat means nothing if the new typing brings worse weaknesses or the speed tier drops. Watch what happens when we map the Alolan forms. The cluster splits. A handful shoot up into the high viability zone, making them well worth the cost. But a massive chunk drag down into the bottom right, demanding heavy investment for absolutely zero competitive return. You only get a high return on investment if you drop an Alolan form into a tightly restricted competitive niche. If you try to run them as plug-and-play generalists, they will underperform. Let's look at how shifting elemental typings dictates a Pokémon's role. Alolan Ninetales trades pure fire for ice and fairy, while Alolan Marowak swaps ground for fire and ghost. Ninetales gains highly specific utility. With the Snow Warning ability, it summons Hail on entry, which lets it instantly set up Aurora Veil to have incoming damage for your entire team. Marowak gets an equally specialized toolset. Its new typing and Lightning Rod ability give it hard immunities to electric and fighting attacks. This comparison matrix details the trade-off. To make Aurora Veil work, Alolan Ninetales must outpace the base 100 speed tier, forcing it into a fragile support role. When the matrix updates for Marowak, its inherently low speed makes it entirely dependent on Lightning Rod and new immunities to survive. You cannot drop either of these into a standard lineup. They require highly specialized, carefully constructed team compositions built specifically to mask their weaknesses. This introduces massive opportunity cost. Every time you dedicate a roster slot to one of these specialized roles, you are actively choosing not to bring a safer generalist attacker that can handle a wider variety of threats. Gaining a superior typing or a new ability is an upgrade exclusively if you are willing to construct your entire team's win condition around supporting that specific Pokémon's gimmick. Alolan Golem serves as a clear cross-format cautionary tale regarding the temptation of theory-crafted high-damage setups. The strategy relies on Alolan Golem's Galvanize ability, turning normal-type moves into electric-type. Players pair this with Explosion, turning Golem into a volatile, self-destructing bomb. This bar chart maps damage outputs. A standard Earthquake sits here, but applying Galvanize, STAB, and a Life Orb to Explosion yields an unprecedented 585 base power attack. But watch actual mechanics. That 585 drops to exactly 0 against Protect or Volt Absorb.
The setup itself is cripplingly vulnerable. Getting Alolan Golem into position with Trick Room or Belly Drum takes multiple turns. That gives your opponent ample time to simply switch in a Ground-type Pokémon, which takes 0 damage from electricity. The true cost here is severe. You are sacrificing a permanent team slot and multiple setup turns for a strategy carrying a high probability of a 0% return. Cantonian Golem doesn't fare much better in standard aggressive play. With 6 elemental weaknesses, 2 of which deal quadruple damage, it gets knocked out before it can execute a basic strategy. Theoretical math isolated in a vacuum does not equal competitive wins. Hyper-specialized nuke gimmicks consistently fail against balanced, fundamental meta strategies. A Pokémon's viability is often artificially dictated by the format rules and restricted tiers you play in. We see this clearly with Sandslash and with Cantonian Golem in Pokémon Go. In unrestricted mainline formats, like Smogon's overused tier, Alolan Sandslash is completely and mathematically outclassed by Excadrill, which performs the roles of both sweeper and rapid spinner far better. Alolan Sandslash only finds actual competitive success in artificially restricted lower tiers. Down there, the dominant sand stream ability is completely absent, but snow warning exists, giving Sandslash an environment where it can finally operate. We see similar hard ceilings in Pokémon Go PvE mechanics. Years ago, Cantonian Golem was the premier counter for legendary birds. Today, that is no longer the case. Take a look at this damage multiplier chart. Cantonian Golem takes a devastating 256% damage from grass and water attacks. Deploying it now makes it a severe liability that rapidly drains your hard-earned Stardust and revives. In all unrestricted play, Golem's role has been permanently replaced by Tyranitar running Smackdown.
There is exactly one strategic exception, retaining a Cantonian Golem strictly because it holds the legacy fast move Mudshot. That move generates energy quickly enough to make Golem viable, but only inside highly restricted Go PvP cups. Investing resources into outclassed generalists inherently carries a hard competitive ceiling. They survive only when the format rules explicitly ban their superior alternatives. Bringing together the isolated mechanics of Smogon tiers, VGC doubles, and Pokémon Go gives us a definitive guide for allocating your resources. This flowchart breaks it down. Unique ability and typing? If yes, invest. It must fill a specific vacuum. For Pokémon Go, branch down to unrestricted format. If a replacement exists, avoid. Never spend Stardust on classic generalists without a necessary legacy move. Finally, we have to look through the TCG collector lens. Competitive irrelevance actually connects directly to real-world financial trajectories. This line graph tracks TCG Golem card values over time. As you can see, outclassed, non-meta Pokémon cards are experiencing harsh corrections, with vintage Golem prints taking a sharp, undeniable 55% year-to-date plunge in market value. TCG investors should not confuse classic character nostalgia with current market utility or actual buyer demand. The universal rule for regional variants is simple: prioritize actual competitive utility over the novelty of a new design. Alolan Forms are ecological sidegrades. They sacrifice general reliability for dominance in highly specific scenarios. Know your format, check the alternatives, and spend your resources where the math actually backs you up.